And Jim, we do have one person already here to provide public testimony, and then one person who said that they were going to call, and we're still waiting for them to call in.
Okay. And is that a way that you can queue them up? Is that the?
We would just call them by name. Do you have the list of participants available on your screen?
I see Carol Paulson. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
And then we're waiting for Tom Fry to call in.
Well, we are about 2 minutes from starting. Let me make sure I've got my materials up. Okay.
Okay, so YouTube is going and all the settings are correct, and I'm going to go ahead and start the recording.
Okay, perfect. Oh, I see. Well, I just clicked that I consented. I hope everyone else does.
I think we're ready to begin whenever you are.
Okay, thank you. It is now 5:30 p.m. on September 23rd, 2020. This is the time and place for the Salem Hearings Officer. I am the Salem Hearings Officer. My name is Jim Brewer. We have one matter on our agenda tonight that is CU SPR DAP 20-06. I have some procedural things and some information about the order that we're going to work tonight that I'll go through first, and then we'll begin the actual hearing itself. Due to the pandemic, we're doing the hearing virtually, and I hope everybody is able to get the technology to work, and I hope that my technology continues to work as well. I'm probably the least accomplished person at doing these things, so we're really leaning on staff quite a bit. Might mute yourself, Aaron, until coworkers have left the building. Thank you. Now, oh, that also cut out a little air sound, I think. Just as we would if we were in person, the hearing tonight will be conducted with a staff presentation first, followed by the applicant's presentation, questions from me. Then all the testimony, including comments from neighborhood organizations, persons in favor or opposition to the application, rebuttal by the applicant will also be done virtually. And people were required to sign up to testify with Mr. Cardoso by 3 o'clock today. And I understand a couple of people have done so. So tonight's proceedings, the order will be the staff report first to be presented by Aaron Panko. The applicant's presentation, and that'll be limited to 15 minutes. A neighborhood report, if there is any, limited to 10 minutes. Then we'll move into general testimony, and I'll ask people who are going to testify tonight, including the applicant, please give your name and address so that the recording picks it up. We'll take in order first testimony in favor of the application, and we'll limit that to 5 minutes. Testimony in opposition, also limited to 5 minutes per person. Testimony that's neutral, also limited to 5 minutes per person. rebuttal by the applicant. We're going to limit rebuttal, of course, to the scope of issues that were actually raised in opposition, and we'll limit that to 5 minutes as well. And then we would close the public hearing. Any participant may ask to hold the record open or ask to have a continuance. And if those are requests that you're going to make, please do so during your testimony so that I can tell whether there's a good reason to do so. With that, this is conditional use, Class 3 site plan review, Class 2 driveway approach permit, Class 1 design review case for 5600 Block Woodside Drive Southeast. The hearing is now open. I want to direct your attention to the applicable criteria that were found in the notice of staff report. The testimony and the evidence for the public hearing really should be directed towards these criteria because that's all I can rely on to make a decision. We'll begin with SRC Chapter 240.005 Sub D, which establishes the following approval criteria for a conditional use permit. 1, the proposed use is allowed as a conditional use in the zone. 2, the reasonably likely adverse impacts of use on the immediate neighborhood can be minimized through the imposition of conditions. And 3, the proposed use will be reasonably compatible with and have minimal impact on the livability or appropriate development of surrounding property. SRC Chapter 220.005 Sub F Sub 3 establishes the following approval criteria for a Class 3 site plan review. A, the application meets all the applicable standards of the UDC. B, the transportation system provides for the safe, orderly, and efficient circulation of traffic into and out of the proposed development, and negative impacts to the transportation system are mitigated adequately. C, parking areas and driveways are designed to facilitate safe and efficient movement of vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians. And D, the proposed development will be adequately served with city water, sewer, stormwater facilities, and other utilities appropriate to the nature of the development. SRC Chapter 804.025 Sub D establishes a list of about 9 criteria for driveways. Aaron, are you going to go through those in your presentation?
I'm not going to mention each of them, but I will enter into the record the staff report, which has a response to each of them.
Okay, then I feel like I am required to read these. So if everyone will bear with me. 1, the proposed driveway approach meets the standards of this chapter, meaning 804.025 Sub D, and the Public Works design standards. 2, no site conditions prevent placing the driveway approach in the required location. 3, the number of driveway approaches onto an arterial are minimized. 4, the proposed driveway approach, where possible, A, is shared with an adjacent property, or B, takes access from the lowest classification street abutting the property. 5, the proposed driveway approach meets vision clearance standards. 6, the proposed driveway approach does not create traffic hazards and provides for safe turning movements and access. 7, the proposed driveway approach does not result in adverse impacts to the vicinity. 8, the proposed driveway approach minimizes impact to the functionality of adjacent streets and intersections. And 9, the proposed driveway approach balances the adverse impacts to residentially zoned property and the functionality of adjacent streets. And finally, SRC Chapter 225.005 Sub E Sub 1 establishes the following approval criteria for a Class 1 design review. 1, a Class 1 design review shall be approved if all of the applicable design review standards are met. Okay, and I'll take a breath for air there. I will remind people who were testified tonight, failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city or other parties the opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeals to the State Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. So if there's a point you want to raise, this is the time to do it, or you may not be able to later. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. So again, that's kind of a warning to the applicant. If you've got a concern about one of the conditions of approval, this is the time and place to raise that. If there are any objections on jurisdictional grounds in the holding of this hearing, not seeing anybody waving their hands frantically on camera. Uh, This is conditional use, Class 3 site plan review, Class 2 driveway approach permit, Class 1 design review case for 5600 block Woodside Drive Southeast. May we have the staff report, Mr. Panko?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim. My name is Aaron Panko with the City of Salem Planning Division. Let's see if I can share my screen here.
Yes.
And you're able to see that full screen now?
Yes.
All right, thanks. And again, this is a conditional use permit, site plan review, driveway approach permit, and design review case number CU SPR DAP DR 20-06 for property at the 5600 block of Woodside Drive South. At this time, I'd like to enter into the record the staff report, including its attachments. We did get some testimony from surrounding property owner and from the South Gateway Neighborhood Association after the staff report went out. So we'd like to include that in the record and in this presentation.
And so those will be entered into the record. And I think what you're talking about is a September 16, 2020 email from Andy Yang and a August 22nd letter also by email from Michael Hayes, who's the vice chair of the South Gateway Neighborhood Association. Is there anything else?
I think that's all we received. Is that correct? Yeah.
Okay.
So this is a vicinity map of the subject property. The property is approximately 1.77 acres in size. It's located nearby to a few parks, Sunnyside Garden, which you can see just to the west of the property, and Wiltsey Road Park to the south. The property has frontage along Mildred Lane Southeast, which is designated as a minor arterial street, and Woodside Drive, which is designated as a local street. Off the map and to the south is Battle Creek Park, which is classified as an urban park. The property is split zoned. The eastern portion of the site is zoned IC, Industrial Commercial, and the west portion of the site is zoned RA, Residential Agriculture. The apartment complex is going to be located on the eastern portion or the IC zoned portion of the site. And you can see that the property is also bisected by Wallen Creek. It's a designated waterway that flows across that property. And here's an aerial photo taken recently of the property. The property is vacant, and you can see the creek has some vegetation that's growing right along the center of it. The property on the north side of Mildred Lane is also vacant. It shares the same split zoned IC and RA zoning. And then to the south is a single family residential neighborhood. This photo was taken from the intersection of Mildred and Woodside Drive, looking towards the property. You can see some of that vegetation that's growing near the creek in the background. And this photo is taken along Mildred, looking east towards the property. The proposed development includes construction of 2 apartment buildings. Each of them contains 12 dwelling units for a total of 24 units. The buildings are about 40 feet in height. Multifamily residential uses require a conditional use permit in the IC zone. And per the Salem Area Comprehensive Plan, multifamily developments should be located in areas that provide walking, auto, or transit connections to employment centers, shopping areas, transit service, parks, and public buildings. The subject property is located on Mildred Lane, which is a minor arterial street that provides pedestrian and bike connections from the property to surrounding areas, including the commercial street corridor, which provides transit and access to shopping and employment opportunities in that immediate area. The multifamily residential design standards require additional screening for apartment complexes where they abut single family residential zoning. And this includes more robust landscaping and fencing. Staff is recommending that the hearings officer adopt a condition of approval that requires construction of a minimum 6-foot tall fence. It needs to be decorative and side obscuring, and it can't be chain link fence. And that's where the proposed multifamily use abuts the single family zoning to the south. The site plan review process ensures that any new development is in compliance with the development standards of the zoning code. In general, those standards include maximum building height, setbacks, off-street parking standards, landscaping, and solid waste service area requirements. The applicant didn't request and nor did they need any adjustments to develop or to any of the development standards. And with the recommended conditions of approval, staff found that the application is in compliance with the approval criteria for site plan review. Multifamily residential development is subject to some additional design standards found in Salem Revised Code Chapter 702. These standards include standards for open space landscaping, site safety and security, parking, and site design and facade and building design. And again, the applicant has not requested any adjustments to those standards. Staff found that the application presented was in compliance with those. So I mentioned we did receive some comments from the South Gateway Neighborhood Association. They had some concerns about the project and how it relates to floodplain development and then on-street parking. So for parking, the apartment complex was reviewed for minimum and maximum parking requirements, and it was found to be in compliance for the number of units that it has. We did receive comments too from our Public Works Department addressing floodplain. It doesn't look like the property is currently in an identified floodplain area, but there is a study, it looks like, for stormwater in that area. And as a result of that study, it could be determined that there is some floodplain here. The Public Works Department did put a recommended condition on here that all development or the buildings on there need to be elevated to at least 1 foot above base flood elevation. So that's if there is a flood elevation determined on the property. So staff recommends that the hearings officer approve the consolidated applications subject to those recommended conditions. Thank you. Can't hear you, Jim.
Thank you. I really don't have any questions. Let's go ahead and move to the applicant's presentation.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Brandy Dalton. I'm with Multitech Engineering at 1155 13th Street, Salem, Oregon, 97306, 302. And I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicants. I don't have a whole lot to say tonight because Aaron and I have been working on this project and he really outlined everything adequately in the staff report, the findings. We've reviewed the conditions of approval. We did see condition 6 pertaining to floodplain construction at the time of building permits. We don't have a problem with that. So as far as the conditions of approval go, we're good with them. After working with Aaron, we knew that these conditions were probably going to be placed on the subject property. We have no problem providing a fence and any kind of landscaping along the south property line to provide an adequate buffer adjacent to the single family residential homes to the south. Really, that's all I have to say tonight. We do meet all the criteria for the conditional use. We do meet site plan review design standards for the new code that's in place. So with all that, we'll have minimal impact on the neighborhood along with our adequate setbacks. And with that, I think I'll just leave it open for any questions or rebuttal.
Well, I had a couple of questions prepared for you. One of them actually had to do with the fencing and, am I on? Yeah, okay. Couldn't remember if I unmuted or not. It really had to do with the fence and the kind of buffer areas that are established, and it sounds like you've reviewed those and the applicant is prepared to meet those conditions.
Mm-hmm, that's correct. We've been working with Aaron on this, and we knew that was something that he was going to make a condition of approval, and we don't have a problem with that.
Okay. So that is really what I have for you tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, what I'd like to do is go ahead and move to the public testimony. And, you know, ordinarily we kind of order people in terms of proponents, neighborhood representatives, opposition. I think because of the way we're doing the virtual things, let's just move to who we have. And I'm sorry, I lost part of the screen there, but I think it's Ms. Paulson. Is that right? Zachary, are you there? I'm looking at Brandy and she's.
Yes. Carol, if you'd like to unmute yourself and turn on your camera, now would be the time to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you. This
Hi.
is a little weird for everybody, so thank you for being here. And if you would just tell me whether your testimony in general is going to be in opposition or in favor of this, that's really more for my notes than anything else.
My testimony is actually fairly neutral, depending on what the outcome of it is. I'm just wanting to provide some information, and I believe that based on that, we'll have some, you know, you can figure out if I'm opposed or for.
Okay.
I see pros and cons.
Okay.
So my name is Carol Paulson, and I'm the property owner at 5711 and 5713 Woodside Drive. I've resided there for 13 years along with other family members. It is a duplex, but we all just use it as a family home. And I've requested to offer testimony today because I believe there's some missing or incorrect information in the findings and conditions, maybe more about missing information regarding the site plan review. In section 220.005 F3, B and D. So in B, it says the transportation system provides for the safe, orderly and efficient circulation of traffic in and out of the proposed development, and negative impacts to transportation system are mitigated adequately. There's a couple of things about the traffic. One, Mildred has put in a turn lane, basically, and it allows for maybe 3 cars going into Woodside Drive and about 3 cars going out toward Commercial. They use the same lane. And so depending on how many new cars are going to be coming up through Woodside, it'll be one of those bottlenecks, much similar to the one that's over by Radio Shack on the other side of Commercial, as you're trying to, you know, get on Commercial from there. That's a concern, as well as the road right now, the way it is, and with all the on-street parking, it tends to narrow down to 1 lane. So people coming the other direction from the south along Woodside coming out, they tend to pull over and wait for the people going north and vice versa. But that also will create some traffic congestion. It might be worth taking a look at, making a study or taking a look at how, especially during peak times. And with that new food cart, some peak times are Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, you know, especially in the evenings, it gets really congested. Evenings as well, when it's nice weather because of the food cart. The other thing said is the transportation, the findings list that the existing conditions of Woodside Drive Southeast does not meet the current standards for the classification of street per Salem TSP, but the street improvements, including right-of-way designation along both frontages, are required. Conditions 7 and 8 ask that half-width right-of-way of 30 feet of the development line and half street improvement, including a sidewalk and trees.
Mm-hmm.
The finding and the design requirements right now do not mention that the current use of the frontage has drainage ditch or a swale, which is consistently filled up to capacity during the rainy season. That swale or ditch of approximately 155 feet was accepted as part of the stormwater runoff flooding mitigation plan, according to the lead project manager, when improvements were made in 2015. Since those swales were already in place, the city did not have to pay to have that area redesigned as they did further south. The rest of Woodside further south has been redesigned to open up those swales. Those swales were already in place. So they did the swales and the rain gardens further to the south to address the continuity of those ditches or swales located on both sides of Woodside Drive Southeast on the north half. All of the swales are part of the strategy implemented by the city or its design contractors as part of the improvements to the inadequate stormwater system that was in place through the fall of 2015. Since that time, these swales still provide drainage for excess surface water from the roadways and other impermeable surfaces located in that area. The idea that approximately 26,000 more square feet of possibly impermeable surfaces will be added to the area, combined with the idea that water retention solutions will be removed, are of concern. When the roadway became saturated with standing and or pooled water, the cars hit these invisible pools, not realizing that the water is deeper than it looks due to the uneven angles of the road. Also, when the water has nowhere to go, in instances when the ditches have filled past capacity, the water runs down the road south and pools right at 5700 area and the intersection of Woodside Drive and Classico Court Southeast. This is a huge driving hazard as cars coming off the hill south to north on Woodside Drive Southeast are unaware of what awaits them at the bottom. Sometimes 18 inches of standing water can be across the roadway, and it's very hard to judge what you're seeing. I would anticipate that traffic to the new apartments will come from both directions as traffic from the apartments at the top of Woodside Drive intersecting with Wiltsey come down the hill toward Mildred now. Further hazards can be in play due to the fact that Woodside Drive Southeast consistently has that on-street parking that I talked about. And so it, you know, in the wintertime, if it narrows and we've got flooding as well, they're going to be sitting in those pools of water. Therefore, I put a request to revisit the design conditions regarding the frontage and perhaps to keep it more in line with the south half of the same block of Woodside Drive Southeast, implementing these swales or rain gardens as a feature to mitigate the flooding, which is yearly to date and does cause hazardous traffic or road conditions. And then the D part of this is the proposed development will adequately be served with city water, sewer, stormwater facilities, and other utilities appropriate to the nature of the development. The findings list the infrastructures for water, sewer, and storm are available within the surrounding streets and appear to be adequate to serve the development. It's also noted on page 16 of the staff report under Natural Resources SRC Chapter 601 floodplain that Wallen Creek bisects the subject property, and this portion of the creek was not analyzed in conjunction with the flood insurance study for the Battle Creek Basin. I bring this up with the findings of the appearance of adequate service of stormwater runoff systems, as I was one of 3 plaintiffs in a suit against the city of Salem, contending that the stormwater facilities were not adequate. The suit was settled 5 years ago with the city paying damages to flooded property after upgrading aspects of the stormwater system to accommodate the, at the time, current neighborhood development. The suit was settled, I am concerned that the staff who reviewed the stormwater information may not have had a picture of what the current state of our neighborhoods during traditional fall through spring rains. To be blunt, without the approximate 26,000 square feet of impermeable surface area running off into the road or worse, being run into Wallen Creek, or the stormwater infrastructure that does run into Wallen Creek, we are at capacity. And I have documentation and photos of that for every year subsequent to that, several times during the year when we have rain events. It is at capacity, it is too full and meeting the top of the current culvert. So after that, the only place it has is to run off into the swales, if they're not full, or back into the street. And while since the movement of the larger culverts and rain gardens have helped keep the creek just below flooding during heavy rains, and we haven't had really heavy rains yet, but moderate rains, the storm drains still back up and water still pools into the street. The city upgraded the stormwater culverts to a larger size, enlarged some of the pipe diameters, and other flood control strategies for the streets of Woodside Drive, put a bump out access as drainage planting square in front of the east side culvert of Wallen Creek, and rain gardens or swales where the parking strips and driveway leading to my residence used to be. But to my knowledge, nothing was done along the face of the property now being discussed for permit.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you just for a minute,
Sure.
Ms. Paulson. We're a little past the 5 minutes.
Okay.
Are you in a place to kind of wrap up? Do you have more to go? Do you, and I really appreciate your tying these directly to criteria. That's very helpful for my organization of thinking about this. do you have documents that you want to submit into the record so that you would need, we can hold the record open if that's part of what you would like to do?
Well, yes, and I think you have the city attorney has the documents because we provided all of the information from a geohydrologist and a
Okay, I'm not really talking about the lawsuit because I won't have that in the record for this case. And so I have what's been submitted for this case, which, so I'm kind of asking, if these are documents that you think are going to be useful to this land use decision, then you could you could ask to have the record held open and you can submit those. But otherwise, they're not in the record, and we're kind of working off of what you're testifying to without my having those documents.
So the photographs would be part of that?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, then let's hold the record open so that I can provide some photographs anyway of.
Okay, so we'll end up holding the record open then for an additional week. So you'll have, and anybody else who's participating can as well, September 30th at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay.
And again, I'm not saying I'm opposed to this. I'm just saying I'm hoping that there's a solution besides pouring more water into Wallen Creek. If there's, I was not able to see what the plan was, the stormwater drainage plan for the complex. Maybe it has nothing to do with Wallen Creek or the pipes that run into Wallen Creek. Just know that that's at capacity.
Yeah, I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm hoping that the applicant staff are also listening. Maybe we'll get a little bit more information now, but maybe they're also at a point where, yeah, it's useful for you to submit some more information, and that just gives us something else to think about.
Sure. Yeah, and I would be willing to talk to anybody independently too, like Randy, in case nobody knows what has happened here.
Sure.
We can show them pictures and give them information.
So just let me ask a couple of questions about things that you brought up in your testimony, just so that I'm up. Do you see the design review plan on your screen as well?
Yes.
So as and this may get all weird because I'm waving my hand, which you won't be able to see. So as I look at that and I think about the frontage, so the parking that the on-street parking, that's along Mildred, is that correct?
No, the on-street parking from the food court overflow is on the west side.
Okay. Okay, well, okay. And I think
I'm trying to help out here and maybe find an aerial photo that has maybe a greater extent.
that'd be helpful.
And it doesn't go quite to the food court. The zoning map here does. It does go out to the intersection.
And that's the food court.
Yeah, over here.
Okay. And then the existing swales and rain gardens, they're trying to look at my own notes at the same time. So they're along the frontage of, they are not along the frontage of this property, but they're adjacent to it, or they are along the frontage?
They are along the frontage of the property. They are along the frontage, all of Woodside Drives. Some were already there and some were new that the city put in 2015.
Okay. And so part of the concern there is just, gee, if you're going to put in curb, gutter, sidewalk, half-street improvement, what happens to all of the swales and rain gardens that are currently working?
Yeah.
Okay, that's again, that's very helpful for me in kind of thinking about this. And again, I truly appreciate your testimony, and I really like the focus on the criteria. That makes it very easy for me to see both what the concern is and how it might be addressed. So anything else? Just really short, because we've gone a little past your time.
No, thank you. I'm good.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Paulson. And Zachary, do we have Is it Mr.? Now I'm off my notes again.
We do have Tom on the phone. He's currently muted, and the way that the phone system works, he'll have to unmute himself from his phone settings
Okay.
if he would like to give testimony.
Yes, let's do that, please.
So Tom, at this time, if you'd like to give any testimony, you can unmute yourself on your phone.
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Fry.
Hello?
Hi, I'm Jim Brewer. I'm the hearings officer. We're in the middle of the hearing. Would you give your name and then you can go ahead and give your testimony. And if you would let me know if you're, I'm not separating things by people who are in favor or people who are in opposition, but it's helpful for me as I listen to, as I look at the record later on to have some idea at each point what people are doing. So if you would tell me, again, just your name for the record and whether you think of your testimony as being in favor, in opposition, or neutral, that'd be very helpful.
And please include your
Okay.
address as well.
All right. My name is Tom Fry. My address is 7533 Tom's Way, Southeast Salem. But my concern is I have a piece of property on Marstone Court, which is west of this property. 1347 is the address of the Marstone Court that I own. My concern is the flooding. Of course, the lady before me had a nice presentation about the problems we've had on Marstone Court and also the adjoining field where the creek runs through. The property, the city has done some of this. I'm in opposition to this project too. I'm sorry. The city has sort of remedied it to a point, but we don't have the lot of rain that floods back on Marstone Court like it did 5 years ago. Every year it would back up, the creek would back up and flood Marstone Court, probably 2 to 3 feet of water. Now the cisterns that hold that water is possibly been repaired. We haven't had a lot of rain where we could test out this repairs by the city, but every year they would give us sandbags and everything else trying to save the water entering our property. My concern is that we've got a vacant lot that this company owns just east of us, and what are they intending to do with that? If they're going to build more things in the future, it's rated for residential or agriculture. Well, what does that mean? What are they going to put a house on each one of those sections west of Wall Creek? What is their plans for the future? Am I making, is this being broadcast or what are we doing here?
Yes, it is being broadcast. I can hear you, certainly. I'm taking your question and I'm adding it into my notes. I will say that under the criteria that I have to work with, I'm not sure that I can consider the future plans on a different property. What I can do is I can look at the criteria as they apply to this particular set of plans for this property.
Well, my concern also is that you have two 3-story buildings that you're going to be building on the Woodside and Mildred. what we're talking about tonight, and with roof design, guttering, and a paved parking lot for all the tenants in that complex. All those are rain catchers, and they're going to be running into the creek. The creek is, as is stated before, is at maximum ability to handle large quantities of water. So I think you ought to take that into consideration, that the city should look into the amount of water that's going to be collected and be pumped into the existing creek. The other question I had was there are trees along the creek at this time. Are they going to remain, or are they going to be knocked down and just be done away with? That's something about people that live on Marstone. They don't like people looking in their backyard from a 3-story building. And that's, we buy over there because we want privacy, and now we are losing our privacy.
Okay.
So that's about all I have to say.
Okay, very good. If you'll, I think that I've captured your points. You may have heard that the record is going to remain open, so people can submit additional written comments until 5 o'clock next Wednesday. But what I would ask you to do is just to stay online, and perhaps the applicant and the applicant's rebuttal, or staff will have some additional comments on these things tonight as well.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Fry. So Zachary, do we have anybody else who's queued up?
Nope, that's all for public testimony.
Okay. With that, I think that we return for the applicant's rebuttal. And that's going to be limited in scope to the things that were raised in testimony in opposition. Would the applicant like to provide a little rebuttal?
Well, I just have a quick question for you. I guess since we're holding the record open until September 30th, do I give my rebuttal now, or do I wait until after all the written testimony submitted? Since I haven't seen, Carol and Tom both brought up great information that as a land use planner, I take very serious when we're looking at a development. So we would love the opportunity to see what they have, or especially Carol, I know she has a lot of information. So then we could address it adequately along with Aaron's help. So I don't know how you want me to do this based on procedure.
Well, so what I will say is, as the applicant bears the burden of proof, you get the last word too. And the way that we would normally do this is that we would hold the record open for a week for everybody. Then you would get an additional week, which I think would be at 5 p.m. on, was that October 7th?
Yes.
And that would be for your final, that would be for your rebuttal. And then you'd get another week for a final written argument, although you combine those if you wanted to by October 7th. If you want to provide oral rebuttal as well tonight, that would be fine. It wouldn't preclude you from adding to that later.
I think really the only thing that I can say tonight is that when we did this development, we work with the city, and we base everything that we put on that site plan is based on code requirements, and we were in compliance with the code requirements. We're not removing any trees within the creek area. We're actually removing one tree on our property, and it's not near the creek. I heard the transportation issues, As far as I can only speak for what we're doing and required to do, the rest will have to be the city of Salem. But this development did not trigger a traffic study. However, we were not allowed to put any access onto Mildred Lane. So our access is on Woodside, and that's something that's required by the city, not us. So we looked at all that as far as transportation. We're doing street improvements. As far as storm drainage goes, Carol brought up a lot of great points that I will definitely take back to our engineer who will be doing all the storm management plans for the site. One thing they always look at, which they do like, or it could be rain gardens and other methods that are allowed by the city of Salem. One thing people sometimes don't realize is that a development can actually help with drainage in a neighborhood, because now the water has a place to go. And that's what we'll be looking at. And so that's why I'd love to see what Carol has, so I can go back to my office and talk with our engineer that'll be designing the storm drainage management plan, and give him that information and talk to him about what's required. But as far as tonight, that's all I have until I see additional information. And then in our rebuttal, I'll be able to provide more documentation
Okay,
that deals with design.
that makes perfect sense to me. Thank you. I think we've set the schedule out. I'll repeat it again here in a minute, but let's get Aaron on. Aaron, from staff perspective, do you have any kind of final comments?
Sure, I'll just kind of echo what Brandy said. So the development here did not trigger a traffic impact analysis for the number of units and the number of trips generated. There are going to be some half street improvements on Woodside Drive. With those improvements, it's the applicant's burden to demonstrate that they're complying with all the stormwater requirements. With the site plan review application, they did provide a preliminary stormwater report and a preliminary utility plan. When they get to the actual development phase, they're going to have more detailed plans that are going to be reviewed by city engineers to ensure that they're in compliance with the stormwater requirements. In general, on local streets, there is on-site or on-street parking allowed, but this development again is in compliance with its minimum and maximum parking requirements on-site. So there should be adequate parking available for that use. And like Brandy mentioned, there are several trees on the site in the riparian area, so within 50 feet of the creek. They are preserving all the trees that are within that area. So that helps to maintain a little bit more of a buffer between this use and Marstone Court. So that's what I have for those points. And then I want to clarify the record period. It sounds like we have 7 days for new evidence submitted by any party.
Yes.
After that, we have a rebuttal period by any party also, and then a 7-day period after that for final written argument from the applicant.
That's correct. So that takes us September 30th, 5 o'clock. I think it's October 7th, 5 o'clock. And then I would assume that's about October 14th, 5 o'clock.
Yes, that would be correct.
Okay, thank you. Well, I want to thank people for participating tonight. The public hearing is closed. The record is going to remain open on the schedule that Mr. Panko just walked through. This is the first hearing that I've done with kind of a full virtual hearing. And I really appreciate people calling in and being online. Those comments will be useful to the city, and they're a critical part of the land use process. So with that, we'll close the hearing. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you and good night.
Good night.
Thank you.